They thought she was just another blonde nurse counting down the minutes to clock out. But when the Navy SEALs fast-roped into the emergency room and called her ma'am, everyone at Harborview Medical Center realized the quiet woman in scrubs had been living a lie for more than a decade. Stick around, because what happened on that rain-soaked night in Norfolk, Virginia, would expose a secret buried under hospital badges and bedside smiles, and prove that sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one checking your for. The fluorescent lights hummed over the ER floor as Lauren Mitchell peeled off a pair of latex gloves and tossed them into a biohazard bin with a soft snap. It was 10:46 p.m., 14 minutes before the end of her shift, and she could already feel the dull ache in her lower back that came from 12 straight hours on her feet. Her blonde hair was tied back in a practical ponytail, wisps escaping around her temples, and her light blue eyes looked tired but steady. To the rest of the staff, Lauren was dependable and unremarkable, the nurse you asked to handle a combative drunk or to restock trauma supplies without complaint. She lived alone in a modest townhouse near the Chesapeake Bay, owned a golden retriever named Scout, and brought homemade muffins to staff meetings. No one knew about the fate's surgical scars beneath her ribs or why she sometimes flinched at the sound of distant helicopters. Mitchell, Bed 7 Meade's discharge papers, called Dr. Aaron Pike, a young resident whose confidence far exceeded his experience. "And can you move faster? We're drowning tonight." Lauren gave him a small nod. "On it, doctor," she said in her soft Virginia drawl, her voice calm enough to smooth glass. She walked the hallway with measured steps, white sneakers squeaking faintly against polished linoleum, passing anxious families and overworked interns, the ordinary chaos of a Friday night in an urban ER. Outside, cold rain streaked across the automatic glass doors, turning the parking lot lights into blurred halos. The police scanner near the nurse's station crackled intermittently, background noise to a hospital that had seen everything from bar fights to hurricane casualties. Lauren finished updating a chart and checked the wall clock again. 10:52 p.m., 8 minutes. She allowed herself a small exhale. That was when the ambulance radio erupted with a burst of static sharp enough to turn heads. "Harborview. This is Private Transport Sierra 1. ETA 2 minutes. Multiple GSWs. Patient critical. Situation compromised." The word compromised sliced through Lauren's thoughts like a blade. That wasn't standard paramedic language. Charge nurse Elena Ramirez grabbed the receiver. "Sierra 1, clarify compromised," she demanded. But the only response was rotor noise. Deep, heavy, unmistakable. Lauren went still in the center of the hallway. That wasn't an ambulance siren in the background. That was a military-grade helicopter flying low and fast. "Elena," Lauren said quietly, her tone shifting almost imperceptibly, "lock down the ambulance bay." Elena frowned. "Lauren, don't start. It's probably just The building trembled as a helicopter descended not onto the rooftop helipad, but into the parking lot itself, wind and rain whipping sideways in a violent spiral. Conversations died mid-sentence. Patient sat upright. Dr. Pike stared toward the entrance. "That's not protocol," he muttered. The double doors to the ambulance bay burst open seconds later as 3 men in dark tactical gear stumbled inside, carrying a fourth between them. They weren't paramedics. They moved like soldiers. The man in the middle wore a blood-soaked suit jacket, his face pale and slack, crimson pooling beneath him onto the tile. One of the armed men raised a compact rifle. "Doctor, now. He's bleeding out." Panic erupted. Family screamed. A nurse ducked behind a supply cart. Dr. Pike froze, clipboard trembling in his hands. Lauren didn't duck. She stepped forward. Into the open space between the gunman and the trauma bay, her movements unhurried, eyes scanning automatically, weapon type, trigger discipline, formation spacing, blood loss volume. "Put the rifle down," she said evenly. The armed man blinked at her. "Ma'am, move back. If you fire that weapon in here, you'll hit oxygen lines and kill your friend faster than the bullet wounds will," she replied, pointing calmly to the bright arterial spray soaking through the suit. "He has maybe 90 seconds before hypovolemic shock becomes irreversible. You can argue with me. Well, you can get him on that gurney." The authority in her voice bypassed fear. Without realizing why, the gunman lowered the barrel slightly. "Trauma 2, Lauren ordered over her shoulder. "Dr. Pike, your lead." Pike swallowed. They have guns. Lauren's eyes hardened just a fraction. And he has no blood pressure. Move. The team rushed the patient into the trauma bay as Lauren cut away the jacket with surgical shears, revealing 2 chest wounds and 1 abdominal entry point. No exit wounds. Internal bleeding. She inserted 4 lines with practiced speed, issuing crisp instructions that sounded less like suggestions and more like commands. Type O negative. Prep for intubation. Get me suction. The tactical men exchanged uneasy glances. This was not the timid bedside nurse they had expected. As Lauren pressed gauze against the largest wound, her gaze caught something near the patient's shoulder, a small, faded trident tattoo. Naval Special Warfare. Her heartbeat faltered once, then steadied. Outside the trauma bay, a sharp crack echoed, glass shattering near the ER entrance. The hospital lights flickered once, twice, then dropped into red emergency glow as backup generators engaged. One of the armed men cursed under his breath. They found us. Lauren's head tilted slightly, listening past the chaos. Footsteps. Coordinated. Not random shooters. Professionals. She removed her gloves and looked at the wall clock. 10:59 p.m. Doctor, maintain airway, she said calmly. I'll be right back. Pike stared at her in disbelief. Where are you going? She met his eyes, and for a brief second the warmth in her expression vanished, replaced by something colder, older. To finish my shift, she replied. Then she walked out into the darkened hallway toward locker 214, where behind a false steel backing lay a compact tactical kit untouched for 12 years. In the past, she had sworn never to revisit. The gunfire inside Harbor View wasn't chaotic. It was controlled, suppressed, and deliberate. And that told Lauren Mitchell everything she needed to know. The men moving through the darkened ER weren't random shooters. They were trained professionals clearing rooms with precision. Red emergency lights bathed the hallway in a dim glow as 4 mercenaries advanced in formation toward Trauma 2. Patients hid beneath chairs. Nurses crouched behind desks. Dr. Pike stood frozen beside the intubated patient, hands shaking. Lauren stepped from the shadows near the supply corridor, posture transformed, movements economical and exact. She tracked their spacing, waited for separation, and when one operative peeled off to clear her flank, she struck. A sharp blow to the base of the skull, a twist of the wrist, a clean disarm. He hit the tile unconscious before he could make a sound. She took his sidearm without hesitation. Inside Trauma 2, Pike stared at her. Lauren, what is happening? Airway first, she said calmly. Don't stop ventilating. The door burst open. Another mercenary entered, rifle sweeping. Lauren fired twice center mass, the rounds slamming into his armor and knocking him backward. A third shot found the gap at his shoulder. He collapsed. Outside, boots repositioned. Professional. Coordinated. Then the ceiling above the ER atrium detonated in a thunderous crash. Ropes dropped. Black-clad figures descended with terrifying precision. U.S. Navy. Drop your weapons. The remaining attackers were eliminated in seconds. Silence followed, sharp, absolute. Lauren stood in the center of the trauma bay, pistol steady at low ready. A SEAL operator entered, rifle trained on her. Ma'am, drop the weapon. She removed the magazine, cleared the chamber, and set the pistol down on a tray. The operator pushed up his night vision goggles and froze. Commander Mitchell? The team leader stepped forward, pulling off his mask. Recognition flashed across his face. He straightened instantly and snapped to attention. Lieutenant Commander Reeves, reporting, ma'am. Every SEAL in the room lowered their weapons. Dr. Pike stared in disbelief. She's a nurse, he whispered. Lauren folded her arms, her expression calm but edged with steel. Your breach was 3 seconds late, she told Reeves evenly. They had interior positioning. Yes, ma'am. She turned back to the wounded man on the table. Rear Admiral Kincaid, Reeves explained quietly. He exposed a rogue contractor. They tried to silence him. Lauren checked the monitor, adjusted the force flow. He'll survive if you move now. Reeves hesitated. Command says you're the only one who can keep him alive during extraction. She glanced at the clock. 11:18 p.m. Her shift had ended 18 minutes ago. Around them, frightened hospital staff slowly stood from hiding. Lauren looked at her blood-speckled scrubs, then back at the SEAL commander waiting for orders. Prep transport, she said. The team moved instantly, forming a protective perimeter as if her word alone triggered motion. As they escorted the stretcher through the rain toward armored vehicles waiting outside, every operator deferred to her without question. Dr. Pike followed to the doorway, stunned. "Who are you?" he asked. Lauren paused briefly beneath the flashing lights reflecting off wet pavement. "Inside this building," she said quietly. "I'm just a nurse." But as the convoy doors opened and hardened warriors stood straighter in her presence, one thing was unmistakable. They weren't calling her nurse. They were calling her ma'am. The convoy disappeared into the Norfolk rain with Lauren seated beside the wounded admiral, one hand steady on his pressure dressing, the other monitoring his pulse as if this were just another ER transfer and not a classified extraction under armed guard. Inside the armored vehicle, no one questioned her instructions. When she told the SEAL to adjust the 4 rate, he adjusted it. When she ordered a tighter formation at the next intersection, it happened without hesitation. Rear Admiral Kincaid drifted in and out of consciousness, but each time his eyes opened and landed on her, recognition flickered there, not of a nurse, but of someone who had once written battlefield protocols that kept men like him alive. "Thought you were gone," he rasped weakly. Lauren didn't look up from the monitor. "So did everyone else," she replied. At a secured naval facility 20 minutes later, medical teams rushed forward, but they slowed when they saw who stepped out of the vehicle first. Word traveled quickly down military corridors. Some stared. Some whispered. One young corpsman nearly dropped his trauma kit when a senior SEAL quietly said, "Show some respect. That's Commander Mitchell." Lauren transferred care with efficient clarity, listing injuries, interventions, projected complications. When she finished, she stripped off her bloodied gloves and tossed them into a disposal bin, just like she had done hundreds of times before. Lieutenant Commander Reeves approached her once more. "Ma'am, Naval Command will want to speak with you. Reinstate you, if you're willing." She studied the rainwater dripping from the hangar roof. The adrenaline was fading now, replaced by the familiar ache in her shoulders and the heaviness that followed old memories. For 12 years, she had lived quietly. Morning dog walks, grocery store lines, double shifts, staff potlucks. No salutes. No classified briefings. Just patients who needed her steady hands. "Reeves," she said finally, her tone calm, almost gentle. "Tonight, I helped the patient. That's all." "Yes, ma'am." He hesitated. "They'll still call you." "They always do," she replied. An hour later, Lauren Mitchell pulled into her townhouse driveway just before dawn. Scout greeted her at the door, tail thumping wildly, unaware that his owner had just stood in the center of a gunfight. She knelt to scratch behind his ears, breathing in the simple normalcy of it. By 6:45 a.m., she was back in fresh scrubs, blonde hair tied neatly again, badge clipped in place. Harborview's ER buzzed with the usual morning shift change. Rumors had already started swirling. Federal agents, a helicopter, sealed reports, but official statements called it a security incident. Dr. Pike spotted her near the nurse's station and froze. "You're back?" he asked carefully. Lauren adjusted her stethoscope around her neck. "Bed 7 needs labs repeated," she said lightly. "And you still owe me discharge paperwork." He stared at her a moment longer, something like all replacing his usual arrogance. As she walked past the waiting room, 2 men in plain suits stood near the coffee machine, posture rigid, eyes scanning. One subtly touched his earpiece as she passed. "Asset secure," he murmured. Lauren didn't acknowledge them. She snapped on a pair of gloves and stepped into her first exam room of the day. To the patients, she was just a nurse with steady hands and kind eyes. To the men who had descended from the ceiling the night before, she would always be something more. And somewhere, in secure military channels that would never be public, her name remained active, not as a casualty, not as a relic, but as the woman the Navy SEALs still called ma'am.